is Talk's international editor, Isabel Oakeshott. We're talking about the shocking scale now of shoplifting in the UK, England and Wales. A record 530,000 cases were recorded in both countries in the 12 months to March the 31st. The problem's getting worse. So, Isabel, can you outline why you think ID cards might be the answer?
Well, I'm not sure that they're the answer to shoplifting per se, but I think they're the answer to a lot. And, you know, I'm a libertarian fundamentally, and I absolutely hated the massive overreach of the state during COVID.
Yeah.
I really recoiled from all of that intrusion and the kind of mandatory this and mandatory that. I can't tell you how infuriated that made me feel and how viscerally I was opposed to it. However, when it comes to running an efficient and pleasant society in which people, I hate to use this phrase, but kind of play by the rules, you know, behave properly, then having a system by which everybody can be easily identified makes an enormous difference. And before everybody kind of shrieks in horror, we basically already have this. You know, pretty much everyone has a passport. And if they don't have a passport, then they've got a national insurance number. A national insurance number is just a basic thing that everybody gets at the age of 16. And so in a sense, everyone's already got an ID card. It's called their national insurance card. I don't think these days you get an actual card, though you and I are probably old enough to remember getting it. Do you remember the red and blue things?
That was a great rite of passage, wasn't it?
Absolutely. So you've already got an identity as far as the government's concerned. And I don't think you'd have to add much to that national insurance number to make it really usable. And what we have at the moment is a very sorry situation in which we have an unknown number of illegal immigrants in the country who are able to work on the black market, commit crimes and all manner of other awful things with complete impunity. They're able just to melt away into society. They're able to use public services without producing any ID. I'm thinking in particular of the NHS. We all know the scale of abuse of the NHS by health tourists and people who come specifically to use it as a kind of international health service. So I really think the time has come now to make this mandatory. And I know it's controversial. This is not, by the way, a Reform Party position. Nigel Farage is much more wary than I am about going down this route. So just to be clear, I'm just speaking for myself here. It's just my view, having seen how well it works in the UAE, where you have to basically produce your ID card for almost any serious interaction, whether you're getting healthcare, whether you're trying to buy a property, whether you're trying to rent a property, even in fact, and you're going to hate this, Mark, when you get a mobile phone contract. And you know, many people are going to recoil at that, but I can tell you there are huge advantages to living in a safe environment. I have 2 teenage girls here. I never worry about them going in cars with local taxi drivers. I don't worry about them being out late because people just respect the law.
Indeed, but if you look at the debanking scandal, or indeed, as you quite rightly mentioned, the authoritarianism that we saw during COVID, ID cards would have been leveraged in both instances, wouldn't they, by governments that chose to impose their will on us. So, for example, during COVID, you would have had to have shown your ID to get into a nightclub and demonstrate whether you were vaccinated or not. And similarly with the debanking, what happens if you become political and perhaps it's the wrong politics and they can put a little note on your ID card saying this guy's a wrong and don't let him buy a train ticket?
It already happens, you know, with the debanking, you know, that's already a thing. I mean, in terms of don't let them buy a train ticket, that is the Chinese social credit system. And in no shape or form am I saying that that's to be pursued. To the best of my knowledge, no one takes it that far in this part of the Middle East. I don't think that we have to necessarily imagine the most extreme possible example of use of this system, which would be the Chinese social credit system, or probably something they've got in North Korea. to say we can't have it at all. I mean, that's a bit like saying you can't have any other system other than the NHS apart from the American system. You know, it's a bit facile to say we can't have any form of basic identification because it might be used to stop you getting a train ticket, just as it's facile to say we can't change the way the NHS is funded because otherwise we'll be like America. There are middle ways, and I think most of us can probably agree that the current system, whereby it's a sort of free-for-all and illegal immigrants are allowed to just melt away into our society, isn't doing anyone any favours, apart from those who don't wish our country well.
Is there a concern around forgery, Isabel, in relation to ID cards?
Really good question. I think technology has probably come way beyond that. But I mean, that's always the case, isn't it, with any documents? I mean, you know, there are forged passports all over the world, aren't there? And forged other documents. And, you know, either way, technology is brilliant at producing forgery, but it's also these days possible to use biometrics, and those are widely used here. In this part of the Middle East, they're used in many countries. I mean, even in the UK, I think, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think we use biometrics for fast-track passport control.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty difficult to forge your retina pattern and the other biometrics that are used.
And do you have to carry an ID card on you at all times in Dubai?
I don't think you do. I actually don't know the rule on that. I do carry mine because it just sort of crops up, you know, weirdly. Sometimes if you just want to go into a building or something, I don't know if it's like go to some particular appointment. Sometimes they ask for it at reception, but I don't think it's a way of trying to monitor or track you as such. It's just a way of making it easier you just swipe the thing and then you're in, rather than having to painstakingly write down all the details that you would in a similar building in the UK. I don't actually know the answer to that, but it's just not really seen as a big deal. It's just part of, you know, it's like carrying a bank card or something. It's not as if someone's going to stop on the street and say, show me your ID. I mean, unless you did something wrong.
I mean, could someone like Sir Keir Starmer as Prime Minister be trusted with that level of power and that incredibly potent infrastructure of an ID card, particularly if there was another pandemic? Would you not be quaking in your boots?
I mean, perish the thought of this Labour government being in charge of that kind of emergency. I don't trust this government on any front, not on anything. So no, I hate the idea of them being in charge of any system that allows tracking and tracing. But I also hate the status quo in our wonderful, my home, which is the UK. I hate what is happening to our country and the kind of free-for-all that it has become for boys in balaclavas on bikes delivering fast food when everybody knows that those people who are masked up in the middle of summer are working illegally. You know, I would like a system in which the police could confront those people who are wearing masks and clearly working illegally and say, where's your ID?
Most definitely. We've got this from Gary. Hi, Mark. We've been travelling the world since March. We got out of the UK as we had enough. We're yet to find a place that feels as unsafe as Brighton, which was our last port of call in the UK. Woke Brighton, where they just munch on couscous. Who knew? He says we were in Dubai and we weren't spending lots of money, but we were made to feel special. The service is extraordinary. OK, well, more on this in a moment. The calls are stacking up as well. 0344 499 1000. Will you accept ID cards in this country in order to tackle illegal immigration and also to maybe catch those shoplifters, of whom there were 500,000 last year? But next up, should Sir Keir Starmer cancel his holiday to tackle the growing migrant crisis and anger over migrant hotels? That's next. So here's a question for you. Should Sir Keir Starmer return to the UK, cancel his holiday to tackle the growing migrant crisis and anger over migrant hotels? Isabel Oakeshott, I guess there's never a good time for a politician to be abroad.
No, I mean, I've never sort of begrudged politicians from any party their summer holiday, but it's very obvious that something has got to give on this migrant crisis. And that something is not simply an announcement that Labour is going to speed up the asylum appeals process. I mean, that they think that this may take the heat out of the situation is just absolutely laughable and shows just how out of touch they are.
Yeah.
So I don't think Keir Starmer coming back from holiday would make any difference whatsoever, unless he was willing to stand on Downing Street outside number 10 and declare that every arrival on a small boat across the channel will be incarcerated and deported forthwith. You know, that's the kind of scale of what we need from number 10 at this point. And if he's just going to come back and announce more tinkering around the edges, he might as well stay on his sun lounger for all the difference it's going to make.
On a point of order, I think Starmer's in Scotland, by the way. I need to double check that, but I think he's north
well,
of the
you
border.
can definitely be on a sun lounger in Scotland, although you may get a few midgie bites.
You might, just a little bit. Yeah, I mean, could this crisis engulf his premiership, Isabel?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, I really do believe we're heading in that direction now. But we've already seen in the last 24, 48 hours, the beginnings of what I think is the breaking of the dam. We've had David Blunkett, a real Labour grandee, coming out saying and suggesting that something needs to give in terms of ECHR and the other international rules that Sir Keir Starmer is so obsessed by and thinks means we have little to no room for manoeuvre.
Yeah.
That to me was a very, very significant intervention. And we've had another Labour backbencher, I think, has come out and said something very drastic needs to be done. It's quite apparent to me that this can't go on. You know, the absolute tidal wave of illegal immigrants coming across the channel in particular, but there are also plenty coming by other means, cannot be allowed to continue. We're on the verge of civil unrest already. People are behaving very well at these migrant protests. The protests have been effective, at least in the case of the Epping Council one. And I think people have got, you know, their blood is up, and this is only going to build. I don't think that the flow of boats across the channel is going to particularly abate just because we get to winter. That's an old thing. It's now an annual issue. And Starmer's going to have to do something proper, not just tinker.
Most definitely. I mean, the language around this has changed. You mentioned David Blunkett. There are a couple of memes going around saying is former Labour Home Secretary David Blunkett now far right as well, for suggesting that perhaps we should exit the ECHR. Meanwhile, the Conservatives have changed their rhetoric, haven't they? I'm just looking at their X feed at the moment. It shouldn't be a revolutionary act to fly your own flag in your own country. And then perhaps more powerfully, just 2 hours ago this was posted, I believe, Britain is our home, not a hotel. That famous Overton window has shifted.
I mean, the thing is, you know, great. Thanks, Tories, for finally saying all this stuff. You know, I don't think this is any excuse for Labour, because they had many, many years in which to work out how to address this problem. But it was the Tories that landed us where we are now. And for that, they deserve to be never again be trusted by the British people on the matter of immigration. You know, I can't listen to them seriously, I'm afraid. I do listen seriously a bit to Robert Jenrick, because I think he did resign over this issue when he was in government. He has fought hard on it, but I think Suella Braverman as well. But beyond that, I can't listen to them, you know, ticking off Labour about it. They're the ones that left this country in such a mess.
Do you blame Boris Johnson in particular rather than the Tories as a political grouping? Because I feel Boris went a bit AWOL with the open borders.
Well, Boris, absolutely, famously, I remember when Boris actually suggested an amnesty for illegal immigrants in London when Boris was mayor. So that would have been, I don't know what year that was, but kind of around about, sometime in the early 2010s, probably. Maybe it was before that, maybe 2008. But yes, I mean, he was famously sort of relaxed about what he would have seen as multiculturalism, you know, relaxed attitude to immigration. But you can't put it all on him. You know, the rot set in, I suppose, in the early 2000s with the accession countries. And then under the Tories from 2010, you know, they had an incredibly lax attitude to immigration in general. And they did nothing when those first small boats started coming over, nothing at all. I actually remember when the first boat was spotted, and I remember thinking, crikey, you know, is this going to become a thing? You know, a couple of blokes virtually on a canoe coming over. I remember it was like 2016. And you know, instead of seeing that as a massive red flag, the Tories just kind of shrugged and did nothing about it. And now we are where we are.
We are where we are. Their pinned tweet: if you arrive in Britain illegally, you cannot be allowed to stay. Our policy is simple: deport. Do you think it's conceivable that Starmer will begin deporting people if he becomes politically desperate?
Well, he would say he's already deporting people. I mean, you know, they trot out some figures about how many they're deporting. I mean, by the way, we haven't talked about one in, one out, have we? I mean, it got a bit quiet on that. I thought we were going to be given so-called regular updates from Yvette Cooper, Home Secretary, about how many have gone out in exchange for the numbers that have come in. I think it's fair to say the way it looks at the moment, the one in, one out policy has been the total farce that most of us predicted it would be. Thousands and thousands have come in and perhaps a handful have gone out, and nobody is really pointing to who or where those people are. So we're already deporting a handful of people, but it in no way offsets the number coming in. And we're not deporting the obvious ones to deport, which are the criminals.
Most definitely. Neil has messaged in. Mark, what's going to happen when all of these speeded up backlog claims are basically given the green light to clear them? And that's going to be the strategy. And in fact, the vast majority of people that do enter the country illegally receive asylum in the end. And that's got to stop, hasn't it?
Well, I'm going to be very boring and factual here because I actually got this wrong the other day on Kev's show. I, like you, thought the vast majority were ushered in, and actually the statistics have fallen. It was about 60-something in terms of approvals for asylum claims, and it is now 49%. See how they did that? See how they just magically got that below 50%? Little bit suspect, I can't help thinking. And I don't really trust the figures overall.
Well, I've heard figures of 90% previously. But the issue is if they're not granted asylum, they don't always leave.
Well, exactly. Because guess what? They are not detained on arrival. So, you know, anyone can melt out of an asylum hotel, out of one of these migrant hotels, or out of a home of multiple occupancy. Just as we've seen in the last couple of weeks, people have been able to melt into those hotels. There's a bloke on, I think it was on TikTok or Twitter, who just kind of blended into one of these hotels. He walked in and had a meal, and nobody really noticed because there's no particular monitoring of comings and goings. I think he was actually arrested for his troubles. I'm not sure he really should have been. It was rather a service to the public interest, I would have thought, to show just how easy it is to blend in with a bunch of random people who are being given free accommodation.
Something that's often said regarding the illegal immigration is how minuscule the figures are. But I don't buy that, because 50,000 people in a year is a lot, Isabel. And in the course of this parliament, that would be 250,000 people, undocumented folk who have entered the country illegally. That's a massive figure.
Do you know, I find that suggestion that these figures are shrug, nothing to see here, let's move on, pretty insulting to everybody's intelligence.
Yeah.
Frankly, one wrong person is 100% too many. We know, because there was this case only a few months ago, that there have been several Iranian nationals that have come in by the small boats who are terror suspects. You know, is that not a big thing? Is that just infinitesimal figures? And by the way, if the kind of figures that we're talking about here, as you say, 50,000, more than 50,000 under Keir Starmer alone, are infinitesimal, what does that say about the wider number of immigrants coming in? You know, I know for sure from the very extensive research I've done on this issue that actually many migrants now, illegal would-be asylum seekers, are being advised by the people smugglers not to come by boat, but to come in the back of lorries or in buses. We're not talking about any of those people. That just suggests that there is a multiple of the numbers that we know about and we're shouting about. None of this is insignificant. None of it is trivial. And it needs to stop from the individual to the greatest number.
Isabel, you've sparked a debate on ID cards. This from an unnamed listener. Oh, Isabel, you normally talk so much sense. As you say, we have national insurance numbers, so why must we have ID cards? It's the short end of the wedge and will go further. Likes of Dubai and Singapore are crime-free because of the punishments, not the ID cards. If Blair wants it, it must be wrong. Michael's not happy about that and that issue as well, and that suggestion of ID cards. Jeremy in Exeter, hi Mark. Isabel Oakeshott is talking Blairite nonsense. Digital ID is designed to surveil and control us, the honest, law-abiding citizen who pay our way. It won't stop illegal immigration or the activities of the immigrants. I shouldn't be just surprised at someone who jumped into bed with Hancock, really, but oh my God, sorry. Do you know what I've got to do? I've got to actually check these messages before I... before I proceed. I tell you what, we're going to have a right old ding-dong about this with your calls next. OK, this from Keith in Poole. Mark, asylum grants that you quote are first decision and ignore appeals. 50% of appeals are successful. So overall, it's probably more like 75% accepted. Mick in Bromley. Wow. Am I correct when Isabel Oakeshott said, where are the police asking for ID cards of the scooter delivery riders? Where are your ID papers? It's like the Second World War, he says. Give them an inch and they will take a mile. Thank you for that, Mick. Let's take a voice note now from Anna on ID cards. Go for it, Anna.
Mark, I don't know why anyone thinks an ID card will stop an illegal immigrant. They are entering illegally and refusing to state their identity, and they are facilitated by our government. How will me carrying an ID card stop crime? Unbelievably stupid.
And let's hear from Dave on ID cards as well on a voice note.
Good evening, Mark. Reference digital IDs. This is Tony Blair all over again. We don't need them. We don't want them. They will control you at every aspect of your life. And they know everything. And they can just debank you. They can do everything. I've got a driving license and it tells anybody who wants to know about me everything. Digital IDs, no way, Jose.
Dave, thank you for that. Let's go live to Lincolnshire. Mark, you're on Talk. Good evening.
Hi, good evening, Mark. How are you doing?
I'm very well. Listen, Isabel sparked a fantastic and very interesting debate on ID cards. I mean, I do think that if they could tackle illegal immigration, then they would be worth having. But will it work?
No, they wouldn't be worth having, Mark. You're well off the mark, my friend. So is Isabel, I'm afraid, on this. 100% she is. I mean, for a start, she's comparing Saudi Arabia with the UK. You know, Saudi Arabia is an absolute monarchy state. It's not classed as a democratic state. You say anything against the monarch or Islam or anything like that, you mug somebody, you do any crime over there, the punishment is literally brutal. That's why they have low crime rates. You know, digital IDs, it's a classic symptom, isn't it? Well, a classic fix, isn't it, for a symptom that the state causes. Yeah, the state causes the problem by allowing mass uncontrolled immigration for decades. That's the problem here. So you have all these people in the country. Recent studies show it could be as high as 1.5 to 2 million people in this country illegally, which is why we don't feel like you can move in the streets, why everything feels so cramped. Yeah, because there's that many people here that aren't legal, and they don't even know who half the people are. It would take a heck of an inventory of the country to actually get some grasp of how big the problem is. Digital IDs aren't going to fix that, but what digital IDs will do is give the government obviously a bit more control over what you're doing day to day. You know, show me your papers and all this kind of stuff. But further than that, the biggest issue that I have with it is that once you've got digital ID, you're only a stone's throw away, something that the Labour government would love to do, even the Tories would love to do it, and that's a stone's throw away from a social credit system. Because then, I mean, even if you think about it, Mark, they're even starting to kind of bring that in now. Can you remember all that talk where they run about if you commit some various kinds of crime, you can be banned from the football for life, you can be banned from the pub, you can be banned from using a train. Can you remember that? They were just talking about this the other day. That is essentially a social credit system. Yeah, so they're obviously showing, as far as I'm concerned, they're already showing their desire to bring one in. Well, if you let them give you a digital ID, and this is the problem, they want you to have it. It's the same as the Online Safety Act, Mark. Oh, it's to protect the children. Don't you want to protect the children?
I know.
Only then you find that it's also clamping down on everything else around that.
Absolutely. No, Mark, I'm undecided on this. You see, I want illegal immigration to end, and I suppose the argument for these ID cards is that if you are in the country illegally and you try to do something like apply for, accommodation or something, housing, that you'll immediately get found out as illegal and then you're deported. Is that not an argument?
No, it isn't, because how do you, a lot of these people that are living illegally are living with criminal landlords that are more than happy to bunk up half a dozen in a room, in a property that they will own, that landlord will own quite legally, but you don't necessarily know who he's putting in that building, do you?
Isabel,
he might have...
I take your point, Mark. Stay on the line. Isabel, your reaction to these comments?
Well, I think Mark said it himself. He contradicted himself there, where he said we don't know who half the people in the country are. If you have an ID system, you know exactly who everybody is, and that is the point. And it doesn't have to be that extreme. You're talking about this show me your papers thing. I mean, all I can say is it doesn't feel like that. I live in a society that has them, and it doesn't feel like show me your papers. And what I would add to it, and this is actually a rather subtle thing, it actually creates a great deal of trust. What it means is you can have any number of people. Just to give a little domestic example, let's say somebody who's coming to help fix the plumbing or, deal with an electrical problem. It's very, you don't worry about letting such a person into your home and going out while they're in your home to do something else, because there is this ID card system. So it's very easy to trace. If anything happens while you're out of your property, then it's very easy to trace who did it, and there are consequences to pay. So actually it leads to much more trust. And that is why in countries with these systems, for example, like Singapore, it's very similar. People quite routinely leave their front doors open. They leave them unlocked because it is just, there's an acceptance that people don't go marauding around taking your stuff.
I mean, Mark, if you look at Uber taxis, they're safer than a regular sort of local taxi firm, aren't they? Because of the technology that shows you who the driver is of that car and what the reg is, and even a photograph of him. Is that not a good test case for this?
No, it isn't, because quite a few drivers for Uber are illegal anyway, because they just buy a license. They give a cut of whatever they're earning to whoever actually owns that license. Isabel was talking about, I contradicted myself. No, I didn't. How exactly did I contradict myself? Yeah, there could be up to 1.5 million, 2 million illegal people in this country. Doing an inventory of them, that doesn't change. You don't need a digital ID card to do that, because it won't solve that problem anyway. The only way you solve that problem is to invent it, to go around the country and actually find out who is there. And then when you start seeing people who aren't there, then you can do something about that. Having a digital ID card doesn't identify them, because they're going to stay under the radar anyway.
OK, well, listen, Isabel, last word, couple of seconds if you can.
You can't live in total isolation. All of these illegal people will have to interact with branches of the state at some point, use a bank, get a phone out, whatever it may be. So they'd quickly be identified.
Isabel, it's been such a treat to have you on the show again.